We're very thankful that you took some time out of your day to hear about ILINX 8.0. We've had a couple of dot releases in the last 12 months or so that, we had some nice little features in there and some bug fixes, but 8.0 represents an enormous amount of development work and testing work and documentation. And you'll see as we go through here, we have a spectrum of new features, and they range from entirely new products all the way to, just some nice little productivity features. So we'll talk about some of the things that have been added to the suite in general, certifications and things like that. And then we'll talk about the ILINX eForms product, which we've had an ILINX eForms product for a number of releases, but this one represents a huge move forward in that technology. We've also revamped ILINX Flex, and we'll talk about Capture and Content Store and the features that are going into those core flagship products, as well as a new product and then some enhancements to some of the other surrounding products as well. So let's talk about some of the general features. Across the board, we've added some certifications for ILINX 8.0 that include Office 2016, which is also the Office 365 desktop install, as opposed to the Office 365 web install. And here we're talking just about the desktop components. And so we've certified these across the product. This includes the email integration, both the server and the Outlook plugin, as well as format converter and working with the Office rendering products on the back-end side. We've also added Windows Server 2016 support, as well as SQL Server 2016. One of the other areas that we invested heavily in 8.0 is enhanced auditing, and this provides complete user auditing. So everything a user does within ILINX content and ILINX Capture is audited to a brand new separate audit log. And this can be directed to your database or to the file system like you do today. Now, we've preserved the server logs, so that continues to happen. But these audit logs represent a very formalized structure for recording what users are doing. So emailing documents, modifying index fields, downloading documents, changing information within a workflow, or completing a batch, logging in, logging out, even failed log attempts. So all of this information is now accessible in a much easier to understand format. And we've also added another feature to Content Store, which we'll talk about later, which makes it even easier to create some custom reports against these user audit records. Another big change to the product is we're introducing our online help system. In previous releases, we've delivered the user guides and administrative guides as PDF files, and they were the content was great, but it was a little more difficult for the end users to get at that help content. So in 8.0, we have the Help Center, and I'll show you a little some screenshots, and you can browse out there right now and check it out. So all of the user guides and admin guides are now online. So this provides a couple of things. One, it gets easier user access and allows us to update that content dynamically. We've added some installation enhancements as well across the product, and a couple of examples here are the ability to automatically upgrade ILINX Capture extensions. So if you're creating extensions within your workflow or client-side scripts and you've built them within the editor in the ILINX Capture client, we will take care of automatically upgrading those to ILINX 8.0 and going forward. We've also enhanced the database utility that creates and upgrades your ILINX database to make it more DBA friendly. There were a couple of operations that required administrative privileges, so we'll try and execute those, but if that fails because the user account that you're using doesn't have the appropriate permissions, we'll get you those scripts and you can give those to your DBA and they can execute those from the comfort of their own cubicle or desk. So let's talk a little bit about the helpcenter.ilinx.com, which you can go there right now and check this out. I mentioned all of the end user guides and admin guides are now online, searchable, and accessible through this web interface. And this, again, allows us to do real-time updates. In fact, we made some updates just yesterday to a couple of the pieces. Each of the ILINX clients, so ILINX Capture, Content Store, and Flex, have contextual links into this new Help Center. So if I'm in Capture and I press the Help menu, it'll take me directly to the ILINX Capture Help topics. We've also made, as we were moving this from PDF out into HTML, we've made significant updates to the content. So hopefully you'll find this easier to navigate and a lot more informative. The other documentation, such as the tech guides, which includes our SDK documentation, our installation guides, and the product support matrix, along with the release notes, are still delivered in PDF files, and those come with the binaries that you receive when you download the products. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. So one of the things I'm super excited about in ILINX 8.0 is the new ILINX eForms product. Now, if you're familiar with the suite, we've had eForms for a while now, but this 8.0 release is huge for us. It represents a shift in the way that we're handling electronic forms. And we even hesitated with the eForms concept because these go way beyond just the traditional electronic forms, and they're really a way to create web applications. They're very mobile friendly, so they will work on a phone or any type of tablet device, any browser, any operating system. And the great thing about these forms is they are live throughout the workflow. So a lot of forms products allow you to consume information and maybe deliver that onto some system. But with ILINX, these are tightly integrated with ILINX Capture so that they live throughout the workflow and allow you to continue to interact with the form. We also have ways to mark a form as public. And what this allows you to do is to design a form, maybe a customer information request or a quote request if you provide services, and then publish that out through your public website. And those can be secured or they can be used in a public mode. And once filled out, those go directly into the capture workflow and can facilitate the business process. We have very quick and easy ways to create these and define the styling so that it matches your website. We have a robust theme creator. I'll show you all of these here in just a second. We also have point-and-click form logic that allows you to construct rules to do things like send an email back to the person who filled out the form and also include the information that they filled out as a PDF or include the attachments that they sent. I can also send this information on to another website, and I can map form fields into an HTTP post or query string. I can also send email internally, and I can send it based on criteria. So if this particular form field was set by the form filler, then I want to notify somebody. We also have point-and-click logic that allows you to dynamically hide and show portions of the form, including individual fields or pages within the form. So the form tool allows you to create a wizard-like form. If I have a form that's got 100 fields, I don't want a form that's 3 feet long. I want to create a wizard where I go page to page. And our form logic will allow you to hide certain pages if they're not relevant based on what the user has already provided in the form inputs. We also have payment processing integration, so if you need to collect payments as part of the workflow, you can do that. I mentioned the automatic notifications already. And another great feature, because the eForms are tightly integrated with ILINX Capture, you'll see that they fit very naturally within the existing Capture environment. And I'll show you some examples of creating a capture batch using an eForm and watch it flow through the workflow and interact with it in a very natural way. Also, as these forms move through your workflow, you're not restricted to a single form. So I may have something sitting on my public website, an eForm, that gets filled out, and it comes into my organization and starts routing around through the business process, but I want people to interact with that information using a completely different form. So I can create multiple eForms and using standard capture security, adjust who can see which of those eForms at which points in my workflow. So a department head may see a different eForm that they interact with. It goes on to accounting. Maybe this is an expense report. They see a different form. Maybe it goes on to HR if this is a leave request. So it's totally up to you in how you present this information using eForms. Great. Now let's go to the fun part. Do a quick demo. So let me show you, I'm logged into ILINX Capture here, so hopefully you're familiar with this interface. Now I'm logged in as the administrator because we're going to jump around from different tasks, so I didn't want to have to log in and log out over and over. So, the typical capture user is probably not going to see, the admin tab and report tab and things like that. It's going to be a little toned down interface, but today we're going to use the admin account. So I'm going to create a batch, and this operates exactly like your capture system, in the 7X products or even 6X products. But in this case, we're going to select the ILINX 8 webinar batch profile. And this profile has been configured with an eForm. And we'll step into how this is constructed and how we can tailor the look and feel of this as well. So right off the bat, you see some information here at the very top, my form title. This one has multiple pages, so I have a number of options on how I want to represent my progress through the form filling experience. Then the first field I come to is this company, and you'll notice it's underlined, which you may recall in Capture, if I have a field that is defined as a database lookup field, we designate that by underlining the field name. That capability is automatically propagated into your eForm as well. So if you have database lookups defined in your batch profile and you design an eForm around that, they automatically can come forward into this environment. So if I start typing a company name, you'll see that I get some results, and I can click on the one that I find or the one that I need here through that database lookup. And just like Capture indexing panel, it fills in the rest of the information that I have mapped through my database lookup. As I scan down through here, I also see department is underlined, and it's a drop-down. And, of course, that means that this field is mapped into a Capture batch field that has a database lookup for this pick list. And so, in fact, that's exactly what's happening. As I drop this list down, we're going out and we're executing a database lookup, and we're pulling those selection fields back into the eForm. Now, one of the other I think a differentiator here between this product and a lot of other form products is the document upload capabilities. So I can push this button to select a file, and I'll just grab one here off my hard drive. But as it grabs this file for me, it's going to prompt me and ask me what type of document this is. Now, this is an option. I can just keep this as just a simple file upload, and it's not going to prompt me. But if I have multiple document types defined in my batch profile, and I turn on my advanced upload capability, when a user uploads a document, we're going to prompt them to select a document type from the batch profile. And again, this is based on security, so if they don't have access to all the document types, they're not going to see this. But as I choose these different document types, whatever I have defined in my Capture batch document types is going to be reflected here. So I can create different types of metadata depending on which document type this user is uploading. And I can fill in information here. And once I hit OK, that information is now reflected here on my document upload little list. And so I can select multiple files here, but through my eForms design tool, I can restrict the types of the types of documents that can be uploaded, whitelist, blacklist those types. I can set maximum file sizes for individual documents as well as the total size of the documents and number of documents. I can password check PDF files to ensure that they're not encrypted, and I can also virus scan this information before it comes into my system. So I've selected my file. I'm ready to move on to the second page of this form. And so I'm just showing some examples here, some of our more advanced out-of-the-box widgets, and these aren't really configured. This is just plopped on here. You'll see in just a second. But, of course, this can be soliciting type of information you want. We also have a neat feature here, which is just a wet signature. And so I'll hit the Submit button, and this is going to go right into Capture workflow. So if you're familiar with Capture and bringing content into Capture, I think you'll see that this is very familiar, and it's a very smooth way to interact with the eForms directly from the Capture interface. So at this point, I'll just pop over here to our assigned work queue. We'll see we have a new form in here, and I'm an admin, so I'll hit the download button. But this interacts very, very similar to the existing Capture batch mechanisms. So I have my documents that I can view and annotate, but if I click up here, I get back to the eForm, and all of this information is still live. So I can still make changes if that's the way my workflow is designed, and include additional information. And I mentioned too, we could display a different form at this point in the workflow. So it's very easy to create a streamlined user experience for your business process using eForms. So let's go real quick here, and I will show you what that looks like to edit an eForm. So I'll right-click on that batch profile that we've been playing with, and you see this is the webinar eForm. So let's click the Edit button. We'll go into Edit mode. On the left-hand side, I have a palette of widgets that I can drag and drop onto my form, and then you see the form here on the right-hand side. I can also have a fairly extensive set of form properties that are just global for this particular form. We've got title and description. I have some options here when I submit this form, what I want to do, some confirmation text or redirecting. I have some layout controls and how I want to align things. I can also turn on, if this is going to be a public form, some type of spam protection is probably a good idea. So we have a CAPTCHA integration. We can limit submissions by IP addresses. And if you need to go beyond the capabilities of the out-of-the-box eForms, similar to ILINX Capture, we have the ability to upload custom JavaScript files to allow you to create some different types of interactions. If I needed to maybe call out to a web service, a custom web service, and bring information back into this eForm environment, I could do that. So if I click on a field here, our company field, you see that this is mapped to the ILINX Capture batch field that's called company. And in my batch, I have defined that database lookup, and that's where I inherit that database lookup capability. Similarly, the contact has been mapped to another batch field, and phone, and transaction date as well. And as you saw, the department drop list is mapped to the ILINX Capture batch field called department, which is a pick list, and also has a database lookup assigned to it. So each one of these controls has a series of properties, and it just depends on the control as to what type of properties are available. I mentioned on the upload file, we have a lot of control over how we get those files, which ones we're going to block, which ones will allow, whether or not I want to use that advanced attachment mode that I mentioned, and some other limitations capabilities around that. So I can continue just to add different fields to this. We have some very handy out-of-the-box kind of aggregated widgets, if you will. So I have an address component that I can use and plop on, so I don't have to define all those individual fields. And there's some configuration options. Maybe I want to hide address line 2, and this is only going to be for the United States. So I'll disable that country selection and just show the U.S. states. So very easy to get that going. A lot of other types like currencies that will force a particular dollar and cents amount, email addresses, which make sure that the value that's added is a properly formatted email address. I have phone widgets that are masked, so as I type, it moves me from field to field to field. So just making it very easy to collect this information from your users. So I'll just not save those changes. We'll go back. So the other thing I mentioned was the ability to create and manage some themes. So let me just turn this. I'm going to pick a different theme for this this form that we've been looking at. And let's go back in and take a look and see what it looks like now. And this is just an example, so this is kind of a goofy theme, but just an example. You can change just about every visual aspect of the form, the width, the borders, the colors, the fonts on every single element within the form. And to do that, we just go into the theme editor, say I want to create a new theme, or I can modify an existing one, and then I click through this series of items on my form. And you'll see that we have different things that are editable, and I can click on the form title and change the fonts and make the styles different and make them bigger and change the colors. And I can do this for just about every element of my form. So I can make this form look like my my website if I were embedding this in an intranet site or even in a public website. And I'll show you an example of that here in just a second. So we talked briefly about notifications and the ability for the system to send notifications when a form is submitted. So I can choose to send notifications internally, and I have a lot of control over how I want to format that email, including the ability to embed information that was supplied in the form in my email. So I know what the user selected or what they input or whatever it is that I need to convey via email. I have the option here to create that custom email template. I can also send a copy of that form with all of the data that they filled as a PDF. Now, the other option, I didn't put an email field on my form, but if I had, I could enable the send confirmation email back to the user that submitted the form. So I could make that email required, and so when they fill that in, the form will validate that it is a properly formatted email, and then when they submit it, we'll take all of the information, and the configuration looks exactly like this. I can configure that email to look any way I want and include the ability to send what they filled out to me back to them as a confirmation. And I mentioned you can send this information on to another website if you choose. So that's a nice feature. All right. I talked about the ability to take an eForm like this and make it a public form. So if we were to take this URL right now, and I can go over to another browser, and I can pop this in to the browser, and it's going to log me in and show me that form. Now I'm already logged in, so it didn't prompt me, but this form is secured, so I can't access this form unless I am authenticated into the capture system. So that's fine, but if I'm going to put this out on a public website, that's not going to work because my people that are filling that out aren't going to have ILINX accounts. So I can choose to make this a public form, but to do that, I need to provide some credentials through which this form will be served up to the public, and then once they hit the submit button, it will be that user account bubble that creates the ILINX workflow that then moves on through the system. So I have to put in credentials that are valid, and then it turns this form into a publicly accessible form. So we provide some ways to embed that. Of course, you can just send out the URL if you wanted to send that out in an email, for instance. But we also provide ways, code that allows you to put this into your website. So whether you want to do just a simple embedding, you want to use JavaScript to invoke this, or you want a pop-up, we provide that code for you to do that very easily. Okay, so the last thing I want to show is the logic builder. And this is the page where I would go to create rules to hide and show fields, to hide and show pages within my forms, and as well send information to different recipients via email or sending maybe to another website. So I can turn on this hide and show field, and the first thing I do is I select a field. So let's say I want to show the phone number if the company name is not empty. So in this case, if I pull up that form and the company field is initially empty, we're going to hide that phone number. So if you think about a real case, I might have a checkbox on my form that says, notify me via email when this process is complete. So I could create a rule here that hides the email field unless they've selected that checkbox that they will actually want to be notified. And I can create any number of criteria here to hide and show individual fields on the form. Now, if I've got a lot of information that I want to hide in the event that a certain selection is made, I may want to put all of that onto a page. And so I can create rules that will hide and show individual pages. So in this case, I could say I want to go to this page or allow the user to go to this page as long as all of the following criteria are matched. or if any of these. So if they've made one of 3 selections on the first page, I want to allow them to go to page 2. So very easy to create the logic for that. You can also do this for sending notification emails as well as sending information to another website. The last piece of logic you can do is a success page. So maybe I'm using this internally, I'm doing some HR stuff, and every year we have to take a sexual harassment awareness class. And so I could do that through an eForm, and at the end of that, if I have met my quiz criteria and passed my quiz, I can show a success page to my user. Maybe it's a diploma page that they can print out or whatever. Okay, and then we have some other features there. I mentioned the payment processing, which I don't have configured at the moment. We can also disable forms. So if I just need to take a form offline for some period of time, I can disable that, deleting, of course, or I can duplicate a form. If I need to create a form that's very, very similar to one that I already have, I can just hit the duplicate button and make a quick copy of that. Okay, now I mentioned that we have the ability to create those public forms, and I showed you how that would be configured. So I wanted to show you just an example of some public forms. So I'm going to switch over to a fictitious ILINX University website, and this is not real, but the embedding of the forms is real. So we've taken some of that code that's provided on that page where we configured our public form, and we've made available a student document upload form in this fictitious ILINX University site. So you saw that we can collect name and email, and that will be type checked. The student type could be a database-driven pick list. In this case, we have some logic here to hide and show some fields. You know, if it's a tax document, we want to show, you know, the tax year. If it's some other document, tax year doesn't make sense, so we'll hide that field. And here's a CAPTCHA integration. So if this is a public-facing, you know, I'm probably going to want to do some kind of CAPTCHA integration, and so you can use that full CAPTCHA capability there. We can also do signatures, as I mentioned. So this is a different form. This is a name change type of form where I can. You see here, I've fed information into the form. So if I'm embedding a form, I may want to pass contextual information, the student ID, the supplier ID, the employee ID. We're showing this field here. You could hide that field so that they can't see it, which would typically be the case. It's just shown here for an example. And then we have the live signature field that image of that signature travels along with that document and can be used for different things. Okay, so back to the PowerPoints here. So one of the other big features for 8.0 is ILINX Flex. And this used to be called ILINX Content Store Flex because it really just provided access to ILINX Content Store capabilities. So searching content, advanced searching content, viewing, downloading, creating document versions. So it was really handy for that. But in 8.0, we've expanded it greatly to include access to eForms and workflow. So you can now create new capture workflows using the eForms like you just saw. You can also access capture workflows using views. So if you're not familiar with views, this was a feature added in the 7.0 release. It allows you to create a very specific view into a set of workflow batches. So I can have one queue, but maybe I've got 10 different sets of managers or groups of users accessing it. I can create 10 different views to give them 10 completely different perspectives on that data. So it's a way to control my user experience to make it streamlined for the task at hand. Over on the right, you know that we can access eForms throughout the entire workflow. So you can now interact with capture workflows using eForms throughout that life cycle. So if I wanted to send an email out to a manager, they're traveling, he's at a conference with his phone, he gets an email notification and can go right into ILINX Flex and view an invoice that needs to be approved. They can see the documents right there on the phone, click approve, and off it goes in the workflow. So it ties it all together from a user interface that is accessible from mobile and tablets and things just about any type of platform. And I think, yes, so let me show you this real quick. So I'm logged into ILINX Flex. Now I'm using Chrome here because it has this nice feature, a developer feature to adjust the device, so it simulates the device characteristics of a number of different mobile devices. In this case, I'll pick an iPad just because it's a little easier to see from a webinar perspective. But you'll see this is pretty similar to what ILINX Content Store Flex used to look like, where I have access to applications and I can drill into these applications. I can also run advanced searches if I want to drill deeper down into this information. I can operate on these documents, so I can upload, download. I can change index values on any of these documents that I have permissions to. So this is fairly similar to the way the 7X and even 6X ILINX Content Store Flex client used to work. But in 8.0, we've added the ability to interact with eForms. So you see, I'm logged in as an administrator here, so I see everything that's in my system. But this is the eForm that we were playing with. Oh, I forgot to switch it back to the different theme. But we see this ugly purple theme here. And through the Flex client, all of the same capabilities are available to me, whether I'm using this on a phone or in the browser. I get those lookup capabilities, the database-driven pick lists, the ability to upload documents and the advanced attach modes. All of that works identically whether I'm using an eForm in the Capture client, in the Flex client, or maybe someone just emailed me a URL link to this eForm. Those eForms work exactly the same, or maybe it's embedded into my public website. So that allows me to interact on any device with eForms. And of course, once I submit those, it goes directly into workflow. And so now I have an Assigned Views tab on ILINX Flex that allows me to access the capture views that are defined and provisioned to me in the system. So we have a view here for our ILINX 8 webinar view, and I can provide search criteria, and this is just all defined by the view itself. So I may not need to solicit some information, but if I wanted to search on a particular company, I can do that. Just totally depends on your business needs there. And then again, once you define the view, those views are secured to individual Active Directory groups that are using your system. And I can pick one of these batches, and this information is live in the workflow. And if I had multiple forms associated with this batch profile that I, as a user, had access to, I could choose which form I want to view at this particular point in the workflow. All right, let's go back here. Okay, so let's walk through some capture features, core capture features, and these are a little geeky, but these are really powerful features if you are involved in constructing and designing your business processes. So one of the neatest features that we're doing in 8.0 is ILINX Capture Server Extension Enhancements, and it's a custom configuration interface. So in the screenshot you see on the right, there's a big red box, and that highlights a custom interface that was created for this server extension. And this is important because I can create a server extension as a developer and hand it over to my business analyst or whomever is creating my workflow, and they have a tool that they can, in this case, send an email, HTML email, and they can use this extension anywhere in their workflow, in any of the workflows they want. And I provide the customization interface so that they can configure it for each one of those instances. So I can create, if I have a bespoke system, custom ERP system or CRM system, I can create an interface that allows the capture workflow to interact with that system, and I can create a custom configuration screen for that, so it can be used throughout my workflows very, very easily. We're also going to provide some sample extensions to send HTML emails with attachments and advanced configurations like you see on this screen. the ability to fill and or extract information from PDF forms, address verifications, doing some stuff with Microsoft Flow and Power Apps, so more to come on that. Talking about the ILINX Capture workflow, we've made some great enhancements to some of the IXMs, including the built-in get batch info and set batch info. Now these capabilities, if you're familiar with designing these workflows, we have these two IXMs to push and pull information to and from the database, and it gives the workflow developer a lot of power in controlling when that happens. But for 8.0, we've made these an automatic option. So if you don't need that level of sophistication, you don't have to bother with it. So you can put an assign, a flow decision, a release, a format converter, or a create stamp on your workflows, and you don't have to add the get and set batch info unless you need to control that yourself. We've also added a couple of point-and-click IXM. I'll go into a little bit more detail, but assigning values to and from batch and document fields, you can do now point and click. You see a little screenshot of that up there on the right. And flow decisions, so the ability to define rules to route one way or the other. We now have a point and click. I'll show you some screenshots here in just a second. And in support of eForms, we have a new IXM that allows you to generate a PDF document based on the form content at that point in your workflow. So you may have an initial state that you want to capture as an audit record, but then after the business process, you want to capture, the final disposition of whatever that business process was, and so you can do that multiple times and at any time. So here's the point-and-click flow decision IXM, and you'll see it allows you to access fields within the batch, like is the batch rejected? Is there a parent batch ID? And just almost all of the system fields and custom fields, and then point and click to define your rules for this. So in the case you see there on the screenshot, if this batch is rejected and the batch name contains priority, then I want to route one way or the other. And so it's really easy to plop these down and create some fairly sophisticated workflows just using this new point and click rule. We've also added a new stop workflow IXM. This is really handy if you deal with subflows. Sometimes you get down into the subflow and you want to really make sure the workflow stops at a particular point. You can just drop that IXM on there and then know that the workflow is terminated. So a feature that we had added back in the 7X product, we have enhanced for 8.0, and that's the ability to link content store applications into your Capture environment. So if I'm defining an AP batch profile in Capture, and ultimately I want to capture invoices and route them through a workflow, but they're going to end up in ILINX Content Store, and I already have an invoice application in Content Store, well, there's no reason to really recreate that. I'll just use that invoice application in Content Store as my document type in Capture. And this has a couple of benefits. One, I only have to define that metadata structure one time. Also, any document that arrives in Capture, the second it hits workflow, it's automatically available in Content Store, and I don't have to figure out when that gets released and things like that. Also, I can create Capture-only index values. So let's say I need something to control the routing of my workflow. It's a transient value. It's only important during my business process, so I don't really want to keep it forever in Content Store. That's fine. I can create a Capture-only field, and then once I'm done with my workflow, that information is just purged along with your purge rules for your out-of-process workflows. And one of the enhancements that we added in 8.0 is the ability to continue to modify your application even once you've linked it to Capture. So we've got a number of productivity features that we've added here, some custom menus you can add to the main help menu if you want to, maybe you've got you use a web-based reporting tool, you want to create some workflow reports or content reports, you can create those. We've done some enhancements around error messaging. So when a user tries to access something that's maybe locked by someone else or moved on, we've cleaned that up so that's very obvious what's going on there. We've enriched the batch history for your Capture workflows so that now it's very clear what's going on, it's very concise, and it includes every step in the workflow. And also we've allowed you to now use batch fields for your lookups and pick lists, which is a very popular request. We have done a tremendous amount of work around our Capture mobile clients, significant enhancements, and this has been going on really for a couple releases now, enhancing the auto snap, image size reduction. We've added the ability to whitelist specific device types. We can optionally force a user through a help wizard the first time they use the app, and that can be your help content or ours. We have ways to force reauthentication, and we have an offline mode where the user can continue to collect document images and metadata and submit them, but they sit in an outbox until they can be submitted once the user has connectivity again. Now, we also have a mobile SDK that allows you programmatic access to any of this to build it into your own mobile app. So some other things we touched on, we did some enhancements to format converter. We now have built-in searchable PDF generation. This used to be an add-on. We still have the add-on, which is a very fine product, but you might be able to use the built-in PDF generation, and you can take advantage of that in 8.0 if you have format converter. We've also added a couple neat features to ILINX Release. My favorite is the ability, when you're releasing into Content Store, you can have it look for a document using a certain set of metadata criteria. If it finds it, you can now check in a new version of that document. So maybe I'm doing some type of contract approval or something like that. At the end of my workflow, I want to update what I have in my repository, and I can use this new feature to do that. Okay, let's switch gears. Let's talk about ILINX Content Store. I mentioned earlier, right at the beginning, a new feature that we've added to Content Store that could allow you to create some custom reporting against the new ILINX user audit logs. And that feature is what we call data-only views. So you may be familiar with the ability for Content Store to go out to other repositories and bring back metadata into the searching environment. So that's been in the product for a while, but it always required you to tie that information to ILINX Content Store documents. Well, in 8.0, you can now create data-only views where that information that is searched and presented may have absolutely nothing to do with ILINX whatsoever. And so an example of that may be a financial system. Maybe I want to go out and find information about a particular supplier or vendor, and you can prompt for that information. So these views work very similar to the standard Content Store capture views where you can define your prompting and your searching criteria. As I mentioned, you could go out to the ILINX audit system and create custom reports and see what users are deleting or see what they're checking in and out, or maybe just create some reports that show me what the usage patterns of the system are. So we've also added some productivity features. So some sorting, the ability to retain some user settings as they're working with the system, enhancements around text annotations that were a little cumbersome in past releases. We've streamlined those a little bit. And then just remembering some settings that the user has used to make it easier the next time they do that operation. We've added some new security features, and these are really around a more effective use of those views that we've been talking about. So I can now restrict application browsing, so I can preclude a group of users from seeing that browsing folder and force them to use views. I can also disable my global search function if I need to make sure that they're getting at the content through views as well. So one of the other modules that we've added in 8.0, this is a very exciting one for us. You've heard me talk about the ability for Content Store to access external content, and that's been in the product for a while. But what we've added in 8.0 is the ability to access not only just that metadata, but also content from external systems. So we're calling these the external repository or repository connectors. And so this allows you to configure a connector to a back-end content management system, and we've got some examples shown there, and search that content and bring that content back in the ILINX Content Store interface. And not only that, but also join it with information that's already in Content Store. So if you think about a migration situation where I have a legacy system or maybe just a system I want to move off of, and I want to go to Content Store. Well, I can do that now because I can contribute content directly to Content Store day one, but also configure views that access my legacy content. And I can choose to leave it there until it's no longer relevant, or I can have a migration process running in the background that's taking the information from that legacy system and moving it into Content Store. And the user doesn't know where that content is coming from. So they're just doing their job, they're searching, they're finding business transactional information, whatever it is, and they open a document and they don't know if it's coming from Content Store or your old legacy system. And if they come back tomorrow and do the same thing, that piece of document, piece of metadata and document may have been migrated into ILINX Content Store. And that all happens transparently behind the scenes. So that's a great feature. In 7.2, we introduced the Capture connector for Microsoft Dynamics AX, and it allowed you to create URL links to entities within Microsoft Dynamics. For instance, invoices, employee records, products, and just about anything that AX will allow you to attach a URL to. And you can do this directly from your ILINX Capture workflow. In 8.0, we've enhanced this to allow you to directly insert invoices into Dynamics along with header and line item information. So this allows you to create a complete ILINX invoice processing solution with approvals and matching, and at the end of that process, we can automatically insert that approved and verified voucher into Microsoft Dynamics. Another product that we had introduced in a 7.2, but we've enhanced for 8.0 is the ILINX Export Event Tracker. And so I mention it here just because the 7.2 was a little bit of a soft release, and we just wanted to make sure people were aware of this new capability. This module allows you to define a SQL query or multiple SQL queries in a master detail type of scenario to extract information from any database and create PDF reports or PDF output documents. So we'll run a search, and let's say it could identify a financial transaction and then the corresponding detail records about that transaction, and we can create a PDF document that is an archive of that transaction. And then we can place that out onto the file system, or we can send it to your SharePoint system or your financial system or wherever it needs to go. And this is built within ILINX Export, so you can take advantage of the scheduling, auditing, alerting, and all of the unattended operation capabilities that ILINX Export has built into its framework. Speaking of ILINX Export, let's talk about some of the other ILINX products. We've added some advanced scheduling capabilities to ILINX Export. This allows you to create any number of job times, so a start time and a stop time, and which day of the week you want it to run. And you can create multiple ones of these, even if you wanted to run it from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. and then start up again on the same day from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. You can do that with the flexibility of this new advanced scheduling. We also have the ability to generate PDF reports for your configuration if you want to kind of keep track of how your jobs may be changing as your business evolves. You can also do that, I mentioned down below there with ILINX Import. We've added some enhancements to the ILINX Export retention management capability. These are mainly around performance and usability. So large doc sets we now handle much more effectively. You can use Content Store views to identify retention management content you want to process, enhanced our logging, and you can also view and approve individual documents from the RM approval page if you're using the approval workflow capability. And that wraps up the ILINX 8.0 presentation. So I think Carol will go ahead and open it up. We have just a few minutes before the top of the hour for any questions.
Yes, Randy, we did get several. The first one is about auditing. The question is the user auditing being done in the clients or at the API level? And if I use the APIs, will I get the user audits?
The answer is the auditing is done on the server, which is actually where all of the work happens. So any user activity that happens in any of the clients will get audited when that request hits the server. So all of the SDK operations, because the clients are all written against the SDK, will provide that same type of user auditing if you're using the SDK calls, because that's what our clients use. So the answer is yes, all of that user auditing is available even if you're using the SDK.
Great, thanks, Randy. The next question has to do with eForms. The question is, can the uploaded file be viewed side by side with the web form?
Side by side. We do not have the side by side capability out of the box. But I think we could probably work with you and come up with some type of solution. And that may also be something we would want to consider for a future product enhancement. So if you want to drop me an email, maybe we can hop on the phone and let me understand the use case around that, and that may be something we want to add to the product.
Thanks, Randy. Next question. If I have a custom extension referenced multiple times and I need to update it, is it a one-time upload or a one per instance on the map?
That is a great question. So I think this is in regard to the new feature that we've added with the server extensions being able to emit a user interface. And the answer to the question is there is only one instance of that server extension in the system. So if you need to update it, you will only upload it one time. And actually, I forgot to mention something. I apologize. When you upload a server extension in 8.0, it now becomes part of the ILINX Capture workflow extension library. And so when I drop a server extension into my workflow, I can upload a new one, I can code a new one, or I can go to my library and select one that I already have. And then that just loads it for that instance. So the answer is there is only one copy of any given server extension in the system at any given time. So if I need to fix a bug or add an enhancement, I do it one time and upload it into the library, and then it's used everywhere throughout my system from that point forward.
Great, thanks, Randy. I think we have time for one more question, and there are several others, but we will be making note of those and getting back to you directly. But the last question is mobile and off-site. We would need forms behind the firewall. Users log in using a VPN client first. Would imagine this isn't an issue, correct?
That is not an issue. So you can even embed the forms, and then you can do it two ways. One is you could provide the authentication using the SDK. The other way would be just let the form handle the authentication for that particular user. So behind a firewall is absolutely fine, and those forms are secured just like any of the other Capture or Content Store user interfaces or artifacts are.
Great. Let's squeeze in one more, and this question has to do with extensions, languages these extensions are written in.
Good question. So we have a number of extension points in the product, and so it kind of depends on where you're extending. If I am writing a server extension in workflow where I'm going outside of the workflow to do something, I can create those server extensions in VB.NET, in C#, and I can do that in two ways. One, I can go and code that directly in the workflow editor itself if it's a small type of script or extension. But we also provide with the product a set of Visual Studio shell projects that take care of all of that wrapping, and you just go in there and you can take full advantage of Visual Studio, the IntelliSense, all of that. Also, when you create your extension, if you have maybe a third party or an external dependency, when you upload your server extension, you do so in a zip file. So you can include any dependencies in that zip file, and the system will automatically take care of getting those deployed so that your server extension can leverage those. The other extension mechanism happens out at the client. And I have those same types of capabilities, VB.NET, C# as well, but I can also create custom panels within the user interface. And so that's a very graphical type of extension. And for those, I can create those using WinForms, WPF, or in a web form extension, which is separate than the eForms.
All righty. Well, that took us to almost the top of the hour, so I want to thank everyone for their patience. I also want to apologize to anyone that had trouble getting on and had to join us late. We are recording this, and I'll be sending out a link to that recording as soon as I can today. And I want to encourage you all to visit us on our social media sites, on Facebook and Twitter. And also, if you are an ILINX customer and have not yet joined our user community forum on LinkedIn, we'd love to have you participate, and I'll be sending a link to that. So thanks, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you on our next webinar.